Welcome to The Right Atmosphere, podcast for writers, brought to you by Atmosphere Press, the only publisher that puts rewarding and meaningful author experiences above all else. I'm your host, Hala Alawi. On this episode, we'll be talking about how writers can collaborate with composers and other musicians with our guest, Athena Kildegaard. Athena is the author of 6 books of poetry, most recently Prairie Midden from Tinderbox Editions, which was the winner of the 2023 Willa Literary Prize for Poetry. Her poems have been nominated for the Pushcart Prize and have appeared in such journals as Ecotone, Rattle, North American Review, Prairie Schooner, and Beloit Poetry Journal. She teaches at the University of Minnesota, Morris. Thank you so much for joining me, Athena.
I'm so happy to be with you, Hala.
I'm glad to hear that because I myself am particularly excited about this episode because I'm a musician, a hobbyist musician, I will say, but it's always been a dream of mine to work with writers to realize their work as original music. So to have you on is very exciting for me. So first, I just would love to hear more about how you got your first opportunity to collaborate with a composer, and in that collaboration, of course, you were setting your own poetry to music. So tell us about that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, let me say, I suppose there are different levels of collaboration, Hala. So, some years ago, I was working with a group of students at Luther College in Decorah, Iowa, and one of the students played the upright bass, and he was a music major, a remarkable musician. And later in the month that I was on that campus, I was going to be giving a reading. So I went to the student and said, "How would you like to improv on your bass with me as I'm reading poems?" And it was not pure improv because we did have a practice session, but he joined me on the stage. And so before I would read, he would play, and as I was reading, he would play with me and sort of responding to what I was saying in the poetry. So that was really amazing. That was amazing. And partly because he was a wonderful musician, you know. So then I've done other similar kinds of things, improv in nature. And then my 5th book is a book of poetry called Course. And it's a book in part about my mother's death and about the course of my grief. And I applied for a Minnesota State Arts Board grant. Let me say that here in Minnesota, we have phenomenal support for the arts. And that I received the grant, and what it enabled me to do was commission a composer. And I commissioned a composer from St. Paul, Minnesota, named Linda Kockelmeyer, and she chose some of the poems from the book and set them as art song, which is a particular kind of song, usually a singer and a piano, though not always, but that's traditionally the case. And so that was a loose collaboration. But because we had so much fun working together and we got to be great friends, we decided we would do a more robust collaboration together. And in the early first Trump administration, we were both really paying a lot of attention to the news about the way in which immigrants were being treated as they crossed into the United States, and also a deep awareness of the immigrant and exile communities all over the world. So we decided we would collaborate and write a cantata, which we did. So the cantata that we ended up with is a piece called To Know the Path. And the whole process began when I drove into the cities and met Linda, and we had a very leisurely lunch together and discussed what kind of shape this could take. And we decided that using the Stations of the Cross as a kind of a model for how to think about moving through the world might be a way to build our piece. So I went away and started doing research and began composing libretto. And then I would send what I had written to Linda, and she would think about, well, what could she do with this musically? And then she would come back to me with some ideas for what I could do to revise. And over the course of, I don't know, I think it was about a year and a half, we wrote this piece. And it was supposed to premiere at the end of March in 2020.
Oh, of
Yeah,
course.
right. So that didn't happen. So we didn't actually get a premiere of the whole thing until last year.
Wow.
So
Okay. So a multi-year journey.
yeah, and in between, we were very anxious that the immigrant situation in the United States would have changed and our piece would no longer be pertinent. And boy, were we wrong.
Right. For better
So,
or for worse. It certainly
mhm,
seems like for worse. But as
mhm.
far as the process of all of that, I mean, it sounds like it was a very collaborative process from, conception to all the way up to the premiere, almost like you're workshopping with each other all the way through.
Yes.
Yeah. Were there challenges that come up during that kind of collaboration?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, let me just say that I never felt, there was never a moment in the process when I felt that this was not going to work or that we
Mm.
had come up against a wall. I always felt that our relationship was a pure give and take. And I think partly it's because we started with wasn't a super clear vision of what we were going to have, but we had an idea that we wanted a piece that was going to be in about the 30-minute range. We knew that we wanted a piece that would have at least one soloist, maybe two, and would
Mm.
also have a choral group, could be small, and would have small instruments. And we also wanted it to be something that musical groups, I mean, somewhat experienced, but not necessarily professional music groups would be able to perform. So we really wanted it to be
Right.
something that people of, college students and, amateur groups and communities and so forth could perform. So those parameters really helped us, I feel, to be open to one another's suggestions because we both came with our particular strengths. Right?
Right.
So I'm thinking about the text and the sound of the words, and I'm also thinking about what kind of words do you write for a group of people singing as opposed to a soloist? And,
Right.
and of course, Linda is thinking about range and she's thinking about nobody can sing that word. You know,
Right. Yeah.
and also thoughts about repetition and how to use repetition in a particular movement or to have things show up again in later movements. So, yeah.
Right. I love that focus and attention to accessibility that's obviously baked into the work as part of that
Hmm.
writing and workshopping process. Now,
Hmm.
going in the reverse, did you find that you learned anything about writing poetry from this collaboration with musicians?
That's a really super great question. Yeah, I guess on some level I've always been aware and kind of crazy about the relationship between poetry and music. I mean,
Mm.
we have the word lyric comes to us from the lyre, right? So
Right.
there's always been this very really close relationship between poetry and music. But one of the things that Linda got me thinking about was the way in which a poem can have an arc that the music can play up, that you can build into the poem so that the music um can follow or lead, as the case may be. Yeah.
Yeah, I can imagine, once you have this experience, I'm sure it's impossible to pair the idea of music and that flow when you're writing new poetry.
Yes, yes. I mean, you have absolutely hit it, Halo. Like I am I mean, I've done a number of collaborations with composers since working on that project with Linda. She and I have collaborated on a couple occasions, and I've collaborated with some other composers, and also with a dancer, with two dancers.
Oh,
I was
yeah.
on a project this spring with a dancer in Minneapolis and her partner. He does video projections, remarkable video projections, and she's a dancer, and she choreographed a piece, and they wanted words to go with this program length piece. So it was about an hour long piece, and that was super interesting because the words came later. So often in
Mm,
music, composers who are writing art song or writing choral music start with the words and then add the music. But in this case, I was starting with the dance and then thinking about what could the words be to go along with this dance. So
yeah,
yeah,
it sounds like such a beautiful kind of commingling of artistries, of different media, different types of artistry coming together. And so
yes.
this is perhaps a selfish question, but I'm sure there are other people also wanting to know. For any poets who are wanting to work with composers, how do you recommend that they would pursue that?
Well, yeah, that's a great question, Hala. I mean, there is no sort of central hub where you can go to find poets who want to work with you. For sure, people could write to me, and I could help them to find somebody else if what I'm up to is not what they're interested in. I know that a lot of composers are thinking about this because they don't necessarily have money to pay for permissions, and therefore they're limited
Mm,
to texts that are in the public domain.
right.
And but then you run into the problem of poets who maybe want to be paid for their words. And there are poets out there who really are genuinely not interested in having a composer set their work. So I'm not giving you a good answer, Hala. I'm really sorry. But
Actually, I
one,
think this is helpful in itself just to know, sometimes you might come across that situation where you really want to collaborate with someone and it might just not be in the cards. And that's important
yeah.
also to understand.
Oh, that is really right. I mean, you might feel at the beginning that this is going to be a wonderful partnership, and then you begin down the path and realize that what the other person wants of this project is not what you can give. And so you
Right.
do have to be willing, I think, to back out. At the same time, I've experienced this as an incredible growth opportunity for my own creative writing, because it's
Yeah.
pushed me into places that I wouldn't normally go, and I really value that. So,
Before we say goodbye to our guest, I'm happy to say that this episode is brought to you by Atmosphere Press, the only publisher that puts rewarding and meaningful author experiences above all else. Founded in 2015 by an author and PhD in literature, and devoted to serving authors through editorial, design, publication, and promotion, Atmosphere has sold tens of thousands of copies of their authors' books across 6 continents. Visit atmospherepress.com to sign up for Atmosphere's newsletter, The Launchpad, and to learn about submission opportunities, event news, and free book, publicity, and writing residency giveaways. I think that's very beautiful. And Athena, where should our listeners go to learn more about you and all this work that you're doing?
that's great. Thank you, Hala. They should go to, it's pretty simple actually, www.athenakildegard.com. That's my website, and people who go there can find my contact information there, and some news, a little news about who I am.
Great. Yeah, that's perfect. Well, thank you again, Athena, and thanks to all the listeners for tuning in. Thank you so much for joining us on this episode of The Right Atmosphere, the Advice for Writers podcast. If you liked what you heard, please leave a review and share this podcast with the writers in your life. And if you're ready to take the next step in your publication journey, visit atmospherepress.com to submit your manuscript for publication consideration or to learn more about writing and what it is that we do. I'm Hala. Thanks for listening, and I'll catch you in the next episode.